I'm here, and I think you all are here for the same reason, and that is that you are concerned about our planet. And this morning, as we fear for the citizens of New Orleans and the surrounding areas of the Louisiana coastline, facing yet another major storm, Hurricane Ida, we wince at the knowledge that these storms are becoming larger and more intense. Scientists know this, and I quote, "The intensity, frequency, and duration of North Atlantic hurricanes, as well as the frequency of the strongest hurricanes, have all increased since the early 1980s. Hurricane intensity and rainfall are projected to increase as climate continues to warm." U.S. Global Change Research Program. So we all love Earth, we love our Mother Earth, but we are at a point that change and man's impact are paramount. We know this. You know, you only have to listen to a little bit of news to know that some pretty significant things are going on. We've ignored our responsibility to the Earth for too long, and our need for action has become urgent. It's actually past time for action. And I quote from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, "It is indisputable that human activities are causing climate change, making extreme climate events, including heat wave, heavy rainfall, and droughts more frequent and severe." So with this in mind and our concerns that are mounting and growing, we hopefully are all starting to feel that this is our duty, our call. It's even biblical. It says in Genesis 1:26, God blessed them, that would be us, and said to them, "Be fruitful, fill the earth, and subdue it." So why are we putting this gathering together that we hope will be a monthly thing? To become more educated on Earth concerns, to discuss our concerns about the environment, to share ideas about what we can do to heal the environment, to join in community activities that help our environment, to connect with our social justice ministries as we work to do the hard work, the very hard work, to make our community better, to advocate for our environment, and to hold our city officials accountable for the things that we are trying to do. So thank you for being here. And now I'd like to introduce one of our own family here, who is a certified climate speaker. She is also a Bold Justice team leader and the vice president of Bold Justice. She is an educator. She is moderator of Presbytery and a whole bunch of other things. Okay, she just way outdoes herself. Barbara Hassel. Thank you.
Wow. I think it's kind of interesting that we are doing this on the anniversary of Katrina as a Category 4 150-mile-an-hour hurricane is bearing down on New Orleans again. It is so important for us to take the responsibility to care for our creation. Pastor Dwayne speaks often of our relationships with our brothers and sisters. The care for our environment and our creation is not just a Presbyterian thing. It's not a Baptist thing. It's not even a Catholic thing or a Jewish thing or a Muslim thing. So we work across denominations, across theologies. Pope Francis, in his Laudato Si, which is an encyclical that we have been looking at as well, emphasizes the relationships of God to the humans who he has put to care for creation, and also healing not only our relationship with God, but our relationship with the environment. So I'm going to try and stick to a script, because if not, I will just wander all over the place. I want to thank the Clio Institute, which has provided the slideshow, which I'm hoping we are getting, there we are. I can't see it from here, which we call My Climate Story, and that was the information that we used to be certified as climate speakers. Now, I want you to keep in mind that some of what you're going to see is the difference between climate and weather. Weather is what happens every day and which we never get right. When you look at your phone, it says, oh, it's not raining, but you're in the middle of a downpour. That's weather. What happens over the millennia, that's climate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and walk us through some ideas. It's going to be a lot of information, it's going to be some science, but it's going to, I hope, whet your appetite and get your brain thinking about, oh, how can I be involved in this? Because I didn't even think of it like that. So let's get started. Here's the science. Most of us have heard about greenhouse gases. If we've been in any kind of a science class, we've heard about it. We go, oh, greenhouse gases are bad. We don't want to know from them. But they aren't. They're part of God's balanced creation. And what happens is you've got light that's coming in, energy that comes in mostly as light, comes down to the earth, warms the earth, bounces back up into outer space, and some of it gets caught in our atmosphere. Without that, we would have an unlivable planet. We'd be a frozen tundra. So having the greenhouse gases isn't a bad thing. And as the heat is released from the Earth to outer space, one of two things will happen. It's trapped by greenhouse gases, and that heat is radiated back to Earth, creating a warming effect and a livable planet. Some of the greenhouse gases are naturally occurring. They are part of God's plan. Things like carbon dioxide, CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, and water vapor. Now, in our wonderful wisdom, we have created some of our own, and they are the man-made gases, the fluorinated gases. Now, the problem comes when there's too much of the heat energy that's supposed to be outgoing into space is instead trapped by greenhouse gases. But why is that? Because humankind has increased the concentration of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which is a direct result of fossil fuel burning, amplifying the global warming process and moving away from that equilibrium that God created. Now, have you ever heard people say that, oh, well, they're not so sure about climate change being a real thing because there's no consensus among the scientists? Well, that's not true, because there is. 97% of the international climate scientists agree that global warming is increasing because of human activity, and it will get worse if we don't do anything about it. And according to the latest IPCC reports, we're running out of time. Think of it this way. If a fireman calls you and tells you that they are 97% sure that your house is on fire, are you going to stand around and think about the 3% of uncertainty, or are you going to tell them to go put the fire out? Experts are telling us that the planet is on fire. What we do next will determine the future of our planet. Now, the primary greenhouse gas that's emitted through human activity is CO2, or carbon dioxide, and it is altering the carbon cycle by adding more CO2 to the atmosphere and influencing the ability of natural sinks, things like the forests and the soil, to pull CO2 from the atmosphere. You remember your basic science. You need trees because trees pull in the oxygen and give out CO2, pull out the CO2 and give back oxygen so that we have that balance. Well, we have been deforesting so much, we're losing places where that can happen. And it is true that there are natural sources of CO2, but the human-related emissions from transportation, electricity, industry, and other sectors are responsible for the increase that we've seen since the Industrial Revolution. Often we hear that it's a myth that we're not responsible for the global warming. That's just a cyclical thing. It happens all the time, up and down and up and down. And before the Industrial Revolution, the natural climate variations kept the atmospheric CO2 between 200 parts per million during the Ice Age, when it was very cold, and 300 parts per million in the warmer times. But remember, climate looks at centuries and millennia. For a millennia, atmospheric CO2 did not pass 300 parts per million. Today, we are at 416 parts per million, a statistically significant increase. This means the more greenhouse gases, the more heat trapped on our planet. And look how the increase in CO2 in the atmosphere moves right along with the increasing temperatures of the Earth. This increase, which caused the planet to get warmer, drives feedback loops that cause more evaporation, more precipitation, and as we see today, increased and intensifying droughts and supercharged hurricanes. So what are the impacts on our world? Most of the excess atmospheric heat that should be escaping into outer space is passed back to the oceans, resulting in sea level rise. At least 2 feet in South Florida by 2050. As we're seeing that the polar ice caps are melting, I think we're going to be seeing more than a 2-foot rise by then. We have saltwater intrusion, and that affects our drinking water. We have oceanic acidification, which is affecting the sea life that we depend on. Extreme heat causes more average deaths than tornadoes, hurricanes, lightning, and floods in most years. Marginalized communities are systematically exposed to extreme heat compared to others. Agriculture is affected by heat, and that ultimately affects our wallets. In addition to the extreme heat that we see in the changing climate, that also has an effect on extreme cold. There is a phenomenon known as the Polar Vortex, which is a large area of low pressure and cold air surrounding Earth's north and south poles. This flow keeps the colder air closer to the poles. The polar vortex, under the influence of warming air, is becoming more unstable and expands in the winter to send cold Arctic air southward over the United States, Canada, and Europe. This causes and results in colder and more extreme winter storms. If you remember, Texas, which very seldom gets snow, had horrible winters. Now, these changes in climate not only affect our comfort and our health, but also our economy, and that's where it hits us the most. 2020 was the 6th consecutive year in which the U.S. had experienced $10 or more billion weather or climate-related disasters. And with Ida aiming at New Orleans right now, I think we've got at least one of the ones that's going to be tallied for 2021. These weather-related disasters can result in upheaval to all in the form of job loss, add that to our COVIDs, relocation, depression, PTSD, and substance abuse, which are often greater among lower income communities due to financial insecurity, housing disparities, and more limited access to health care. Just a point in fact right now, New Orleans did not have a whole lot of time to get ready for this hurricane. They're having trouble figuring out how they're going to do the sheltering because of COVID. They're trying to find housing and hotel rooms for people to be in. And that's going to affect those people who do not have the option of getting out. Now, my husband just did a service call. He's an air conditioning company. And he just did a service call yesterday for one of his clients whose daughter, he flew out of New Orleans to make it safe. Not everybody has that option. So the climate crisis is a threat multiplier for those who are already experiencing oppression. This can come in the form of race, income, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, age, you name it. And they are less likely to have general protections in our society, with less access to resources to adapt to our changing climate or to pass policies and legislation that are fair and culturally significant. These disenfranchised communities are on the front lines of the climate crisis because they experience the crises first and worst. So how are we going to reverse this trend and create workable solutions? We come together and agree to reach a net zero to slow down the global warming to under 1.5 degrees centigrade. To do this by 2050, there are two main steps to take. One, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And two, by balancing any remaining greenhouse gases with an equivalent amount of carbon removal through carbon sinks, remember those forests and the soil, or by storage. And this action must be swift and dramatic to reach net zero by 2050. And actually 2050 is probably too late. We need to move quicker than that. Now we have a framework for doing that called drawdown. Drawdown is the future point in time when levels of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere stop climbing and start to steadily decline. This is the point where we begin the process of stopping further climate change and avert potentially catastrophic warming. It is a critical turning point for the life of Earth. We do this by reducing emissions in the electricity, food, agriculture, land use, industry, transportation, and building sectors. Then we support and protect our carbon sinks. Lastly, or concurrently, we address societal disparities to make sure that everyone benefits equitably from climate solutions. So let's take a quick look at those sectors, and this will be very high level. Let's start with electricity. There are many ways of producing carbon-free electricity, such as wind, water, and solar, and they will vary by region. The Southwest and here in Florida has a high potential for solar, while the Front Range of the Rockies and Plains are windy locations. Not only does this help us reach our goal of net zero, but renewable energy is a growing market sector and will create new jobs. Actually, if you look at it, although government will tell you that, oh, no, we can't get rid of fossil fuels because we'll lose all those jobs, the solar and wind industries are far superior in the number of jobs that they create than the fossil fuel industry. Now, we can also look at food agriculture on how we can improve our health and work on our climate goals by changing the way we eat. That's a little harder sometimes to do. A plant-rich lifestyle is the best way to immediately lower our carbon footprint, leading to more sustainable land use practices, a focus on restoring ecosystems, and a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions from food production. Did you know that one of the natural sources of greenhouse gas, methane, is a result of food production that comes from the digestive systems of cows? Yep. Cow farts contribute to global warming. We annually waste 30 to 40% of the US food supply while people go hungry. If food waste were a country, it would be the third largest polluter in the world. Food waste that winds up in our landfills break down and release methane into the atmosphere. You can start reducing food waste at home with a few easy steps. Plan ahead. Plan your meals and shop with a list. Don't go to the store hungry. You will buy more than what you need, and the marketers in the grocery industry know that. And speaking of industry, industry is a major contributor to the climate crisis in many ways. We rely on plastics, cement, and metal for just about everything. But the question is, can we manufacture them without emitting planet-warming gases? One of the man-made gases, hydrofluorocarbons, refrigerants used in your refrigerators, freezers, and air conditioners, are vital to our comfort and not something we're likely to give up. But if released into the atmosphere, it can trap up to 9,000 times more heat than CO2. And it stays in the atmosphere for a long time. CO2 can stay in the atmosphere for anywhere from 300 to 1,000 years. Methane's a little bit shorter than that, but still a significant amount. Creating alternatives that do the same thing, the same function for us, is vital in reversing the climate crisis. Now, transportation is another sector where there are viable means of impacting the climate crisis, but it will require lifestyle changes and government support. Cities will need to invest in electric public transportation and improved routes. I think I just read that Broward County is getting electric buses. Yay, good for them. You could pool the transportation via online platforms, encourage and support carpooling, improve pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, and high-speed rails. Decarbonized transportation in walkable cities means cleaner air. It's really kind of funny that during our lockdown, we immediately saw a reduction in the carbon dioxide in the air. For the first time, we actually reduced it enough that it would have met 50% of our 2050 goal. And we did that in 4 weeks. So it is doable. Unfortunately, doing it that way was not sustainable, and as soon as we all started getting back out into the world and started going about our semi-regular work, we're right back where we were before. But we know it can happen. And I know that personally, when I was still living in Los Angeles, under one of the worst times for smog in LA, I did not realize that there was foothills behind the shopping mall across from my house, because I didn't see it. It just looked like a gray backdrop. And then one day, the heat inversion changed and it lifted, and I went, oh my goodness, there is a view there. You will all remember how you would eat the smog, and that was one of the jokes, how much you having for breakfast. So what does the climate crisis mean to you? Where are you impacted? Basically, your wallet. You have a part to play, and it can be in your self-interest to make changes, because our current economic model based on exploitation of natural resources is unsustainable. It is important to support companies that are sustainable or zero waste, while also focusing on our own reductions and reusing of resources. It's important that we move from being an extractive economy to a regenerative economy, working cooperatively to maintain our world for future generations. And we all need to start on that now. And it may just be baby steps. I have actually made my first step in this. I have recycled for years and years and years. And I have finally bought a compost tumbler. And I am now I'm starting to compost. So, and it's amazing how much is not going in the trash bin, but is going into my compost bin. So why have we brought you here? It's because God has asked us to care for our creation, both from a political standpoint, from an oversight standpoint, and we need to find ways that each of us can be involved. As an educator, I know we all learn differently. For some of you, it might be much more a lecture style, and you want to be involved in something like, a book study, and we have several books that we can work on. It might be that you just want to have a discussion, want to get together in a small group and have a discussion. Maybe you are hands-on, and there's something that you want to do that you think will better the world. We have an awful lot of open space here, so maybe a community garden or something that beautifies the world and makes things better, like a butterfly garden, something to help our pollinators. Maybe you want to be involved in making changes at a governmental level, and that's where Bold Justice comes in. We will be starting our House meetings in the very near future. I think most of you should have gotten save the dates. Both Pastor Dwayne, Cindy and Carmen, and myself will be hosting online listening sessions, and this go round we are adding a Care for Creation story as well, because there are things that need to be looked at. Now, how do we make those changes? That's why we're looking at this. We're looking at the big picture so that we can narrow it down. Now, as I said, today we were going through this really quickly, and if you were like I were when I first got this stack of slides and had gone through my training to be a speaker, it was like, wow, there is just so much. How do we break this down? How do I break it down in 15 to 20 minutes and have everybody understand it? Well, our next step, and if you want to, is I have set up an online workshop called Unpacking Climate Change, which will take what we have just talked about in those various sectors and go in a little bit more in depth to actually get together and decide, what do we want this ministry to look like? Because it's your ministry. This is not Dwayne's ministry. We're not putting anything more on his plate unless he absolutely chooses to be part of it. That's one thing I love about being Presbyterian, is it is a sainthood of believers. Even though he may carry the title of pastor, we are all on the same level. We all have the responsibility to make things happen. So if you have an idea for something that you want to do, please look at the survey that we've handed you. I believe that survey is also going to be online, so that all of our friends that are here online, either watching it today or at a later date, can be part of this. You don't have to physically be in this building to be part of this ministry, and it is your ministry. God gave us the charge to care for His creation. And in fact, next Sunday, if I remember it correctly, it is the worldwide day of prayer for creation, and we've been doing many things. We've got videos that we can work with. We have got a ton of resources. We just want to know how you want to do this. By the beauty of Zoom, we can do it anytime you want to. I won't say it will be at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I'm not likely to be up then. But we may actually even record some stuff and send it out to you so that we can be out there and reach into our community. I don't know if we've got any questions, or if any questions have come up from our online group. Well, that's what. Well, I think that's where it comes down to, where us needing to come together in small groups and talk about the issues and talk about the what ifs. And is there some way we can help? Because, yeah, we're not going to fix it all. But if we can fix even a small piece, it is a step forward. And if every one of us does a small piece and then spreads it out to other people, which is one reason Bold Justice does what it does, which is take things through people power. We had 1,400 and some odd people out here in April for our Nehemiah action, as in terms of a hybrid, so that we are showing that there is more than just one single voice or a few single voices. It's a large voice asking for change. And yet it takes time. And my concern for us all the way around is we are running out of time. We've spent so much energy talking about what this isn't, and letting it get in our way, because now it is at a tipping point. If we don't make some corrections quickly, and we need to figure out what's going to give us the most bang for the buck. Right. Yeah, I mean, I look at it and go, oh, well, okay, so 2050. I may not be here in 2050, so why do I care? But I have children and I have grandchildren, and I really would like to have them have a place to live. So I'm willing to take whatever little baby steps I can to either help our marginalized friends or myself. Any other questions? And if anybody's got their survey done, yeah, because this is, as I said, this is your ministry, and we want to be as flexible as possible to address the issues that you're interested in. It may not even be something we can fix or come up with a solution, but we want to have the conversations. We want to open the dialogues. And by all means, please, even though I've set this up as a follow-up to today for this Unpacking Climate Change, if you know of anyone else who might be interested in doing something like this, they don't have to be part of the sanctuary, but they can go ahead and register and be part of this as well. We want the word going out. We want this to be climate